So we're now on paragraph 4 of this speech that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave in 1951, shortly after he was made Rebbe. And it's talking about this week's Torah portion. And this week's Torah portion, among other things, it talks about the red cow. That's how it begins. And the Rebbe is telling us that this red cow, this whole idea of the red cow, is, after all, it's an antidote to death. Death. And it's telling us that this world is a very bad place, but essentially it's very good. And if a person gets swept away by the world and does very bad things, or says very bad things, so there's a way to fix it. And the way to fix it is to reveal its source. God is creating everything. And God's creating, like we just finished learning in Likuti Torah, and that if a person did sins, purposeful sins, on purpose, he went against God. So what's he going to do? I mean, nowadays there's no holy temple, there's no red cow. He says, but the principles that are involved in the holy temple and in the red cow, they're still here. Right? The fact that we haven't got any temple anymore, that's the way God wants it to be. He wants it to be. He didn't take away the temple because it's showing that he's leaving the Jewish people. Exactly the opposite. He took away the temple because he wants to show that he's not leaving the Jewish people. He took out his wrath on the temple and not on the people, destroyed the temple, and the temple is also going to come back. It was never really destroyed. And so all the principles that were involved when the temple was standing, they're still there now. And in fact, every Jew is a holy temple. It says, make me a temple and I will dwell in them. So every Jew is a holy temple. And we have to make the sacrifices and do the work in the holy temple. And so the sacrifices that were in the temple were only for what we call sins done in ignorance. Sins done in ignorance. You didn't know that what you were doing was a sin. You thought that what you were eating was, fat from a kosher animal, and really it was not fat. It was chalev. Chalev is forbidden. Forbidden fats. Forbidden fats. Or you thought that the meat that you were eating was kosher, and you realized it wasn't kosher. They made a mistake. You ate the wrong meat. Whatever. You lit a cigarette and you smoked it because you thought it was Sunday, and you realized that it's not, it's Shabbat. Right? Or you didn't know it was forbidden to light fire on Shabbat. That's called shogeg. That's called shogeg. Sins which were done in ignorance. Ignorance. What about sins which were done with, full awareness? Person knew the thing was forbidden and nevertheless he did it. Very common, right? It's Shabbos today. What are you driving your car for? Leave me alone. Right? You see Jews that go to the not kosher food and they're not to this. What about people like that purposely they do sins, right? There used to be these kibbutzes in Israel. I don't even know if they exist anymore. These like far left kibbutzes that in Israel that they used to make big meals on Yom Kippur. They purposely used to bring pork and eat it. Purposely. They know it's forbidden in Judaism, but they purposely would do it. Purposely would do it. But you don't find that anymore today. I mean, today, the fact is, even those people in the kibbutzim that they ate kosher, they went against the Torah, but they didn't think the Torah was godly. It's just this laws that these religious, old-fashioned people, they believed in, but we don't believe in that stuff. A person that really goes against God is somebody like Yerovam ben Nevat. He knows clearly what he's doing is wrong, right? And nevertheless, he did it to build the golden calves. Okay. In any case, what do you do with a person like that? That purposely did sins. What do you do with a person like that? So the Rebbe says, no problem. Nowadays, we have the same thing as the red cow. What is it? You come from the essence of your soul. The essence of your soul, essence of the Jewish soul. You wake it up. You wake up the essence of your Jewish soul, and that awakens the essence of God. And the essence of God is the one who gave the Torah. So God can forgive all of the sins of the Torah. in order to draw down from this level of godliness, which is above the whole order of creation, in order to draw down forgiveness for yourself, even if, God forbid, you did purposely sins, in order to do this, it says you have to awaken the essence of your soul. Here we go. In order to mamshich, to draw down, to mamshich sein, from L'mayla mishtalshlus, from the Creator Himself, above the whole entire creation, even above the spiritual creation. That's the essence of our soul, right? From God. That's what's called Yechido Shel Olam, the unique one of the world, God. Darf oich, the avoda, our service, has to be from Yechido Shebenefesh, the essence of the Jewish soul. Now, the Jewish soul has 5 levels to it. 5 levels. And these 5 levels are basically what's called nefesh, that's the lowest. That's the soul which enlivens your body, physical, normal things. Ruach, that enlivens your emotions. Neshama, that enlivens your intellect. Neshama is like your intellect, your consciousness. Chaya, that's will pleasure, willpower, the power of will. You can force yourself. According to your will, you can force your mind to think, you can force your everything. And then there's what's called Yechida. And Yechida is pleasure. Pleasure. But let's translate this into serving God. Nefesh is doing what God says. Ruach is feeling what God wants, emotions. Neshama is trying to be aware of the Creator. Aware. Chaya is the aspect of willpower. Willpower, forcing yourself to do what God wants. And Chaya, Yechida, that's getting pleasure in doing what God wants. You feel the pleasure of serving the Creator. Right? In other words, you identify with God, just like you get pleasure from eating a good meal because you're eating it. If your next door neighbor eats it, you don't get pleasure from it. The same thing, tzaddikim, they're so connected to God that they get pleasure from doing what God wants. It says, well, this aspect of Yechida is present in all the Jewish people. That's why it says, Amech kulam tzaddikim. And in people that don't get pleasure in doing what God wants, they get pleasure from forcing themselves to do what God wants. They get pleasure from forcing themselves to do what God wants. That's the Beinoni. That's called the Yechida. That's called the Jewish part of your soul. You force yourself to do what God wants because that's what God wants. That's the essence of your soul. Only because you wipe out your whole personality, right? Your whole personality. I'm not doing anything I want. I'm forcing myself. That's called Masirut Nefesh. That's called self-sacrifice. Yourself is all these lower aspects of your soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya. You sacrifice all that. I'm not going to do what I want, say what I want, think what I want. I'm not doing anything logical. I'm doing only what God wants. I'm forcing myself to do it. And you get pleasure from forcing yourself. That's what's called Masirut Nefesh. That's the essence of a Jewish soul. You have to put yourself away. Don't pay attention to your urges, to your ideas. Something makes you mad, don't pay attention to it. Right? Something makes you lustful, don't pay attention to it. But I'm ruining my whole life. Right? I'm going to let this guy just get away with that. I got to get mad. Right? I'm getting mad. I got to stand up for myself. It says, you're standing up for yourself, but forget yourself. Forget the self. Now you're thinking about, what does God want? God is the creator. Does God want you to get angry? Yeah, God wants me to stand up. I'm a Jew. I have to stand up. You're making excuses. You're making excuses. Right? It's not so. God doesn't want you to get mad. To defend yourself, okay, but to get mad, who says you have to get mad? Right? You have to do what's right. Sometimes it says you have to get mad at Amalek or whatever, but essentially, in the essence of your soul, you're doing, let's say, destructive things because you're sure that that's what God wants. So therefore you destroy idolatry, you destroy this. But that's very, very rare. A person, generally speaking, has to give himself away to God. What does it mean? That your emotions and your intellect are according to what God wants. You check yourself out all the time. Is this really what God wants? God really wants me to get mad. God really wants me to be lustful. God wants. You go outside. That's like the red cow. The red cow was prepared outside of all the camps. That says you have to take a para. Therefore, you have to take a cow. What's a cow? And the cow is your animal soul, your natural soul, an animal. And it has to be a red cow. What does it mean, red cow? Aduma. Aduma means like powerful, assertive. Your assertive animal soul. Und sich äußig sein and work with it. Wesentlich knowing as line vet durch dem tamever, that you, by you working with it, it could be that you'll become impure. Right? You're sitting and learning Torah, and you're separated from the world. You look different from everyone else. You talk different from everybody else. You think different from everybody else. You're learning the Torah. That's good, says the Rebbe. That's half good. That's good, but it's not very good. It's good, but it's not very good. What's very good? Why is it not very good? Because you still have your terrible personality. You still have you're saying bad personality. You just keep away from the world, and in your house, so you're the boss, and everything has to go away the way that you want. So it ends up that you never really encounter any challenges in life. Your only challenges are to learn a little bit more Torah, do a little bit more commandments, but you're separated from the world. Says the Rebbe, a Jew has to, eventually everybody in the world, you have to fix up your personality. You have to fix up how you deal with the world. You have to fix up the world. If you do so, you're going to come in contact with negative things, and it could be that you'll fall down. But wesentlich, as line vet durch them, it could be that maybe you'll become defiled yourself, but you do it. You do it in order to refine another Jew. Wait, this is a very big point over here we're talking about. You go outside of the camp. What does it mean you go outside of the camp? You go to other Jews. This is a big thing that the Lubavitcher Rebbe established, and because of this, he earned a lot of criticism and even hatred. Right? What did the Rebbe do? The Rebbe opened up the doors of the places of learning so that the pupils could go out. Not he opened up the doors of the places of learning that anyone who wanted to could come in. He also did that. But the point is that people aren't going to come in unless there's some people that aren't going to come in. Maybe they will. You put an advertisement in the newspaper and you come in and learn Torah and people come in. It could be. But those are people that are interested. What about people who are not interested? What about people who don't know that they're Jews and they are Jews? What are you going to do with them? He says you have to go out. You have to go out to them. You have to go out. By going out to them, it refines you also. But it's a little bit dangerous. But on the other hand, that's going outside of the camp. It says, der Arab Lazen, when a person lowers himself, so lieb Tanatova to a Yidden, to do a favor for another Jew outside of the camp, as darf kommen nid, that doesn't necessarily have to result in machane cheshbon, of making all sorts of calculations and reckonings. Und as durch dem vet im zukommen, what you're going to get and what you're going to receive. Yoter mimasha balabayat osa im ani ha'ani osa im balabayat. It says more when you give charity to someone, it benefits you more than the person who receives it. When you give charity to someone, so that person receives money, but you receive a big commandment, a big blessing to God. You gave from yourself. You emptied yourself out for a new blessing. The poor person, he's just interested in getting some money, wants to have some food. You give it to him. When you give away your money to a poor person, that makes an empty place in you that can receive God's blessing. So it says that the rich person receives from the poor person more than the poor person receives from the rich person. Farum, because he says it's true. But that should not be your motivation to work with other people. That should not be, right? I'm working in Kiruv. Kiruv. I'm working in Kiruv. Why? Because it's better to work in Kiruv and you get a bigger reward than if you sit and learn Torah all day. You're makar of another Jew. So, okay, it says that, okay, if that's your only thing that'll motivate you to go out and to talk to other Jews, okay, good. But you should know it's stinky. It's egotistical. Because if you work with other people, now we're talking about the red cow, right? You have to go outside of the camp. Going outside of the camp means that first of all, going outside of yourself, and also going outside of yourself to fix up yourself, and also to go outside of yourself to fix up others, to encourage another Jew to learn Torah, to do a commandment. It says that if you do that, then you get a bigger benefit than they receive. So, but that's not what you're supposed to be thinking about. Because if you go out and help others because you've made a calculation that's worthwhile, is there noch nit arois from zich nine metzius that you really have not gone outside of yourself? You're still doing selfishness. The mele kener durach azo avoda, such a service, nit nemen asmas, you can't get the essence of God, that's what we want to get rid of the intentional sins. Davka azo avoda, it has to be a service, nit nemen atzmos, that if you serve God for any reason, any sort of idea in your mind, I'm going to get a reward, then it's not really serving God. You're really serving yourself. You haven't really touched on what the point of the Rebbe wants, the point of Hasidut is. Davka vener tut yenem, when a person does something, a favor, does, was thereby, which by means of this, veter gor tameveren, that it could be that you'll defile yourself. Avarai vet im der Eibishter upsell, and God will certainly save you. Therefore, kama pamim kacha, God will, I'm sorry, He'll repay you many, many times more. Aber zayin cheshbon, what should your motivation be? As tut es afilu ven vet nor tameh, even if you'll become impure. Let me give you a small example. Chabad has been going out and putting tefillin on people since before the 6-Day War, which the 6-Day War was what? Already 55 years ago, 50 something years, almost 60 years ago. 60 years ago. So part of that used to be that the boys in the yeshiva, I think they still do it, they went to what's called the central bus station in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv was like, somebody said it was rented out by the Yetzer Hora as an advertisement for the Yetzer Hora. Tel Aviv was just terrible. It's different now. It's not the same thing. It's still not, it's still far from the way, Judaism is supposed to be, but it used to be just awful. They had these, anyway. And the boys used to go, young boys from the yeshiva, and they would go and they would stand in the middle of the bus station, which that was like the worst of the worst. And they had all these magazine stands and all these terrible things that were there. And I personally never heard of one young man that something negative happened because of that. There were some that they jumped on the bandwagon in order to give them a chance just to go to Tel Aviv and do what they wanted to. But those that went down to really intention to put tefillin on people, to talk to people about Judaism, I never heard of anything negative happening to them. But all the good reasons that the other Hasidim, other groups have to lock themselves in to the places of learning, and it's a very good thing that they're doing. But it's not. It's a good thing, but it's not a very good thing. Good thing. I never heard of anything bad coming from this. And the boys went into the most defiled place. Not the most defiled places, but they went in the area where these things are, and your eyes see and your ears hear and this. And nevertheless, I never heard of anything bad coming of it. And it was a preparation for Shabbat. As durach adem bittel, by means of this, and ovekleg says by means of by putting yourself aside and thinking about another Jew. That's what's called Kabbalat Ol. That's what's called accepting the yoke. You're doing something outside of your personality. Shalamayla misechel, it's above understanding. Was das is bechinas chuka bayim. This by is a person, what's called a chok. A chok are the laws of the Torah which are not understandable, can't be understood. Is that's what you do. You go out and you actively search out for Jews that are not religious, and you ask them to put on tefillin, or you ask them to come and learn Torah, or you ask them to put on tzitzit, or maybe keep Shabbat, or women go and they ask women to keep family purity. And amazingly, you'd think that everybody would say, "Get away with me, leave me alone." That doesn't work that way. That when you come with a sincerity and people see that you have gone outside of yourself, as they go outside of themselves, it says this draws down the level of the chukah of the Torah, which is above, that the essence of the soul is drawn down from the essence of God. So that's what the Rebbe is saying. You want to get fixed up from all the purposeful sins you did, help another Jew. Help another person. Is their beer? That's explanation, what we said before, as the tzvei and yani, these two things are the red cow, that it, first of all, makes impure those people who are pure, and it makes pure those people who are impure. That's one thing, right? Why? One of the reasons that the red cow is called chok is because, number one, it defiles those who were pure, and it purifies those who were defiled. So what does the red cow do? Does it defile or does it purify? What is it? Which one does it do? So it says both. How can that be? So that doesn't make any sense. Number one thing doesn't make any sense. Number two doesn't make any sense that it's the only sacrifice in the temple that was done outside of the camp. It was done outside of the holy temple. It says now we can understand why. The inyan from chukah, the whole idea of the chukim, the laws which are not comprehensible, not understandable, as durach zed, by means of them, is men megala etzem and neshama. You reveal the essence of the soul. That's the level of chakika, where the soul is carved in to godliness. Bal durach them, because by means of doing these commandments, which make no sense, by a person, a weglegen, by a person, I say, putting himself aside, unbittel, and surrendering himself to the Creator, to Tana Yidden, especially to do what God really is concerned about, the Jewish people, to do a favor for another Jew, in order to refine him, oich ven sulib dem, even that it means that you might have to go outside of the camp, and you have to stop learning Torah and do the commandments, so you become a little bit defiled. Durach dem is men megala etzem and neshama. By means of this, you bring purity and forgiveness, even for purposeful sins. You've changed yourself. It's like you're a different person. They're klolas inyan from Torah, the whole general topic of Torah. Val yesod kol Torah, because the whole essence of what the Torah is, to aroiskein, to go out. From all limitations, is boigen dem engenem ich, is in order to, as you say, change your I, your what they call it, the ego. Nitnor dem ich from the goof, not just forcing your body to do Jewish things instead of normal things, nor oich from dem neshama, means making your soul do Jewish things instead of normal things. Was does drik tzichois, that's what it means, especially in loving another Jew. Which that's the whole Torah. Rabbi Akiva said, love your neighbor as yourself. That's the whole Torah. But what about Jews that are sinners? You're supposed to love them also? So you have to love every Jew. Of course, in different ways, right? If a person is a sinner, doing bad things, then you have to try to do everything you can to convince him that it's not a good way. Sometimes the only way to do it is by being nice to him, being pleasant. We see a lot of stories about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. A lot of times people came to Lubavitcher Rebbe and the Rebbe didn't say, do Torah, do commandments. He was very nice to them. And only after a while did he say, listen, I would like to ask you a favor. You should put on tefillin every day. There were some people that he said that you should immediately. But the point is that you're concerned with the other Jews acting in a Jewish way. That's your concern. So therefore, you've gone out of yourself, fixing others. The power to do this comes from Moses. Was is given, Moses was the Madriga from Nachnuma. Moses was totally surrendered to God. Moshe. So we have a human being, and this human being, Moshe, was totally surrendered to the God who took the Jews out of Egypt and gave them the Torah. Totally. And he was opposed by people who were not totally connected to God. They had their own feelings, their own, their own agendas. Religious people, super religious, right? The enemies of King David were super amazing religious people. There's no one in our generation that was as genius as the opposers of King David. It says Doag, Achitofel, Shimi, Ben Gera. These people were geniuses in the whole Torah. They knew everything, and the secrets of the Torah also. Nevertheless, they opposed King David. Why? Because they couldn't go out of themselves. And they refused to admit that King David, or in our case, Moses with Korach, he's a different person. He's a God person. They couldn't bear it, couldn't stand it. When is Magala, then Bitel, Shemitzad, Etzem and Hashem, reveals the surrender from the essence of the soul, which is by every Jew. So that's the whole idea of going out of yourself and becoming purified from even intentional sins. One way to do it is Torah, commandments, working on your personality, not being an egotist. But the Rebbe is adding a new thing over here, going out and helping other Jews. You go outside of the camp, you are willing to risk your own integrity in order to give other Jews a chance to act like Jews, think like Jews. A lot of times people are just afraid even to talk. The Rebbe, I remember, said a lot of times, someone has to go into the United Nations and just say that the land of Israel was given to us by God. Just say it. But they're so intimidated and they're so scared and they're so just to say, right? Just so the world should not intend. We have to go out of ourselves. When we go out of ourselves, for the sake of other Jews, especially, as that can refine and bring total forgiveness for even purposeful sins. That's what the Rebbe says, and this is what we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. You know what? Let's just do one more paragraph. Here we go. Miyad karet kamapami was said many times, is the oiftu from Torah, that the whole purpose of the Torah is hiskalos from Beta Kavim, that you have to have unity. Men darf taka zich avek legen sulib tan atova. So it's faith. You have to give yourself away and forget about yourself and just to help other Jews. Kitera aromom, like it says, when you see a naked person, a person is naked in doing the commandments. He doesn't have any commandments, garments. You have to cover him. As men zeta, we can say, see, as Aina is naked, a person is naked from commandments, is you have to go and do what you can to put clothes on him. Legin tefillin, put tefillin on him, put on tzitzis, etc. The same, but at the same time, aber, tan men oiv zich, oich nit vergessen. You have to not forget about yourself. You can't give yourself over to doing for the others and just forget about your own self. You have to have fear of God and love of God yourself. Like it says, like it says in the end of that sentence, when you see a naked person put clothes, it says, but from your own flesh, you should not ignore. Don't ignore yourself. Men darf gedenken as men hat allein basar. You're also a Jew. And grubba basar, and you have normal physical, fleshy life and desires and things like that. Chumistika is welchem men darf weken zullen no, Vacant, Zolzen, Vacant, and a Rabschweichen. You have your own flesh, which you have to do the processes in order. If there's what's called salting meat. In Judaism, you're not allowed to eat the blood of meat. So if you want to boil meat, if you want to roast the meat, then you don't have to salt it. But if you want to boil meat, then it's got all this blood inside of it. How do you take the blood out? So it says, first of all, you wash the meat off. And then after that, you put salt on it. And the salt draws out the blood. And then you wash it off. So it says you have to salzen, waschen, wieken. You have to wash it, soak it. And then afterwards, you have to salt it. And then afterwards, you have to wash off the salt. You have to wash off the salt. So it says, what about your flesh, your own ego? You have to take the blood out of it. You have to soak it, and you have to salt it, and then you have to wash it off. In other words, yes, it's good to fix up other Jews and to help other Jews, but you have to not forget about yourself. A person can ask, how am I going to do it? I mean, I'm spending my time with other people. The answer is that God helps. God puts a blessing in learning. That's one thing. But also, God helps you to fix up yourself. You have to fix up yourself. And that's the whole idea of fixing up yourself. That's the whole idea of the red cow. And not only fixing up others, going outside of the camp to fix up others, but also that a person has to correct himself. And this is what we're going to talk about, God willing, tomorrow. Let's now do the Yom Yom.